You hear the name Toyota and what do you think of? Reliability, right? Quality. But behind every car you see on the road, there's this massive global machine of almost unbelievable complexity. So today we're going to pull back the curtain and deconstruct how this absolute giant actually operates, from deciding where to build a factory all the way to how it survives a global crisis. Let's dive in.
You know, calling Toyota a global powerhouse might be the understatement of the year. I mean, just think about this for a second. We're talking about a company that runs 53 production facilities spread across 27 different countries, plus another 19 R&D centers scattered around the globe. And they sell their cars in over 170 nations. That kind of scale is it's mind-boggling.
So that massive scale brings up the big question, right? How? Seriously, how on earth do you coordinate that many moving parts across so many different cultures, economies, and continents? Well, it all starts with one single, absolutely crucial decision.
Okay, so the very first piece of this giant global puzzle is figuring out where to build, and just as importantly, why. In the business world, they call this facilities location planning.
And believe me, this isn't just about throwing a dart at a world map. It is a deeply strategic process. For any company that operates globally, this is the foundational decision that pretty much affects everything else, from your costs and logistics all the way to whether you can even access a market. The whole point is to find one very specific thing.
And that thing brings us to a really key concept, location economics. You can kind of think of this as the holy grail for anyone managing global operations. It's the entire reason a company would go through all the trouble and expense of setting up shop thousands of miles from its home base.
So, to put it simply, location economies just means doing each part of your business in the place where it can be done best. This could mean designing a car in Japan, getting your financing in Canada, and actually assembling it in the United States, because each of those places gives you the best possible mix of cost, talent, and resources for that one specific job.
And look, this huge investment in Alabama, it's a perfect real-world example of this whole idea in action. So you have to ask, why there? Well, Toyota put this massive plant right there to tap into the super productive U.S. labor force and get closer to one of its biggest markets. But it's also about a region that's known for its skilled manufacturing workforce, not to mention some pretty significant state incentives. It is a textbook case of creating location economies.
All right, so once you're on the hunt for these perfect locations, you've got a big strategic choice to make. Do you centralize everything? Build one massive, hyper-efficient hub to get those huge economies of scale? Or do you decentralize, spreading smaller factories all over the globe so you can be closer to your customers and maybe adapt to local tastes? Each way has its own major pros and cons.
Okay, so we've tackled the where. Now we've got to figure out the what. And I mean, for every single one of the thousands of parts in a car, from the big engine block down to the tiniest screw, Toyota faces this same critical choice over and over again.
And that choice is called the make or buy decision. Do we build this thing ourselves, in-house, or do we go out and buy it from somebody else? This is, without a doubt, one of the most fundamental decisions you have to make when you're managing a global supply chain.
So, let's talk about making it yourself. Why would you do that? Well, the reasons are pretty compelling. For one, you could lower your costs. You're cutting out the supplier's profit margin, right? You also get way more control over quality and design. And this is a big one. If you have some kind of secret tech, you get to protect it by not handing over the blueprints to an outsider who might just become your competition one day.
But then there's the other side of the coin, buying or outsourcing, and it has its own powerful advantages. First off, it lowers your risk a lot. If its supplier's country has some kind of instability, your own factories are safe. It also gives you incredible flexibility to just switch suppliers if things change. And if you're a big enough customer, you gain market power, letting you have a big say in prices and quality.
And you want a perfect, super relevant example of this? Look no further than EV batteries. I mean, batteries are literally the heart and soul of an electric vehicle. It's absolutely critical tech. So to control its quality, its costs, and to protect its own unique approach, Toyota is making a massive $1.3 billion bet to make its own batteries in the US. That is a huge strategic move to own its electric future.
All right, now let's get into the secret sauce. The thing that really made Toyota, well, Toyota. We're talking about its relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of quality and efficiency.
And it really all kicked off with this game-changing idea, just-in-time manufacturing, or JIT. Instead of having these giant, expensive warehouses full of parts just sitting there, JIT means the parts show up at the assembly line exactly when they're needed, not a minute sooner. It's hyper-efficient, It slashes costs, and it brings quality problems to the surface almost instantly. For decades, this was the absolute gold standard.
But, and there's always a but, right? Disaster struck. In 2011, a truly devastating tsunami hit Japan, and it just crippled supply chains. For Toyota, that tsunami exposed a really terrifying weakness in their beautiful, efficient system. See, when your suppliers get knocked offline and you have zero extra inventory, production just stops. Dead. The hyper-efficient machine turned out to be incredibly fragile.
But here's the thing that's so important to understand about Toyota. They learned. They adapted. They didn't throw out the incredible efficiency of just-in-time. Nope. They evolved it. They added a new layer, a strategic stockpile of the most critical parts. It's a philosophy you could call just in case.
And boy, did that change pay off. The payoff was huge. When the 2021 global chip shortage hit the world, other car makers had to literally shut down their factories. But Toyota, thanks to their just-in-case stockpile of semiconductors, they just kept building cars. It was an absolute masterclass in resilience that let them outsell their biggest competitor.
Okay, last piece of the puzzle, the money, the financing, all of this stuff, the factories, the R&D, the inventory, it all costs billions and billions of dollars. So how does a giant like Toyota actually pay for all of this?
So, generally speaking, a company like Toyota has three main ways to get the cash it needs. They can borrow it, which is debt, they can issue stock, which is basically selling off tiny pieces of ownership, or they can just use the profits they're already making. And each one has a trade-off. Debt is risky, and selling stock means you give up a little bit of control.
So you might be wondering, how does a company that's not from the US tap into those huge American financial markets? Well, one of the key tools is something called an American Depository Receipt, or ADR. Think of it like a special ticket that trades on a US stock exchange, but it actually represents shares in a foreign company, like Toyota. It just makes it super easy for American investors to buy in.
And yep, you guessed it, this is exactly what Toyota does. By issuing these ADRs, they make it incredibly simple for big US investment funds and even regular people to invest in them. And this isn't just some boring financial detail. Think of it as a strategic pipeline straight to the world's biggest pool of investment money, which helps pay for all those massive projects we've been talking about.
And all of this brings us to one final, really big question for the future. Look, Toyota built its empire on just-in-time efficiency, but it took a painful lesson for them to learn the value of just-in-case resilience. So, in a world that now seems to be defined by constant disruption, pandemics, shortages, conflicts, is this new blend of efficiency and resilience the new blueprint for success for every global company out there?